Hello and welcome. We are so thankful that you're here to help with our tote bag project for the International Convention. My name is Linda and I will be guiding you through mini lessons to help you efficiently and easily construct these totes. But once again, on behalf of all involved in this project, we want to say thank you from the bottom of our hearts that you've taken the time out of your busy schedules to assist us with this project. Let's get started. We're going to start with cutting out our totes. Each member of your team will receive a certain amount of fabric that you will be able to use to create your totes. If you're going to be cutting them, we just encourage you to be using the most accurate method possible because fabric is limited and we don't want to have a lot of waste. One of our recommendations is, if you're going to be cutting by scissors, to get one of these cardboard pattern grids. It makes a really great cutting surface and it can help you align your fabric along with your patterns so that you're on grain and you're going to get the most totes out of the amount of fabric you are given. All right, these are available at most big discount stores for just under, I'd say about $7 or $8. You will also be receiving a pattern. These are made out of a tag board or a poster board, and they will help you and assist you. What we recommend doing is taking the fabric you receive and folding it. On this end over here, I have the fold, and I have lined my selvage or my finished edges up. These are the factory finished edges, and we'll talk a lot about those factory edges because it can save you time in your construction of the totes. Now, to start out with, you may realize when you look at your fabric that it may not have been cut exactly on grain. So once you get this lined up, we're going to, just to kind of show you here, there might have been a rough cut in the process of getting this to you. So you want to make sure that, first of all, that you straighten this up. And one of the easiest ways is to take a ruler once you get the really good fold, and I'm just using a number 2 mechanical pencil, and line this up with your grid and using a 45-degree angle, dragging your pencil line all the way down. That'll give you a nice straight edge to cut with. Then we recommend you take your pattern, and that's the fold. This is the 2 selvage edges, and lay your pattern and fold it all the way out. This has a little flap here to get it the right and proper size. And then go ahead and trace your lines. Now, when you're doing this, you may want to create extra patterns, especially if you're doing a group sew, because the patterns will actually start to fray as you trace around them. And remember, accuracy is important, so we're going to trace one here. This is folded, so we're actually going to get 2 tote bodies, and you're just going to keep tracing all your lines, and these will become your cut lines. Then, we also want you to take it all the way across to the fold with a line. All right, you're going to draw that line all the way across. Then you're going to take a pair of shears, and we're recommending bent handle shears for this project, and there's a reason for it. Some of you may have scissors that are symmetrical with the handles. These are really hard to use because what they do is they actually lift the fabric up away from the table. The flatter you can keep the fabric to the table, the more accurate your lines and your cutting will be. So we recommend using a pair of scissors or shears that are actually flat or in line. Now, anybody that has arthritis or is left-handed, these are made by Fiskar, and they are a really economical pair. But what I like about them is that they are spring-loaded. So if you have any kind of arthritic problems or sore hands, and you will after you cut several of these totes out, that these are a good resource for you. And if you're doing a group sew, that's important. Now, something I have seen when I've taught other classes is that individuals try to use small blades with symmetrical. And I'm going to tell you, by cutting like this, you are not going to get a straight edge. The longer the blade and the flatter it lays against the surface will give you a nice smooth cut. All right, I don't know if you can see the difference there, but it will make a difference in the end product. And I just want you to be mindful of that because we want these to sew together well, and cutting will give you a good head start. So to start this out, this is the selvage edge of the fabric. I'm just going to go ahead and start cutting right on that line. Notice I'm not picking this up, I'm not holding it in my lap. I'm working on a table, and the table is actually on risers so that it's up high enough so I don't overstress my back. But I'm just going to go ahead and cut this all the way to the end. Now, if you are a short person doing this, I want you to have a partner on the other side, or just walk around the table and meet yourself the other way. If you overstretch and you don't have long arms, it's going to cause stress on you. Now, this is 33 inches all the way across. I'm also going to go over here and trim my edge. Remember, we're squaring up the first cut so that this is accurate. And while this may not have been accurate because they were cutting off large volumes of fabric, once you get it squared up, you can work from this point all the way for the rest of the cutting process. Now, as mentioned earlier, we recommend that you do as much of the cutting as you can at one time, and then proceed doing the sewings, kind of like an assembly line process, where we try to get as much of this done in segments or steps. And then we're going to go ahead and cut the first 2 bags away from the last of the fold of this project. So we're going to go ahead and cut this second. Okay, now what I recommend is you have a chair or a something to drape these over so they don't get wrinkled, but just drape it over the back of a chair. These are 2 bag bodies that you've cut in one cut. The next step, I'm just going to move these over. The next step then is to open this section here. This will give you 1 more bag body and 2 handles. So we're gonna be making our blows count today, and using this the pattern and the fabric in the most efficient ways. So you're gonna lay your pattern down 1 more time and trace the pattern, and then you're gonna take your bag handles and lay them down and trace around them and get those additional 2 pieces. Then you'll slide it over and continue on. That's how you cut your bag out using a pair of dressmaker shears. All right, the first step in your handles is going to be to finish off any raw edges that you have. Now, remember, we talked a little bit about the selvage, and using that, if you have a selvage edge on the edge of your handle, you can let that be. That's a finished edge coming out of the factory, and it'll work great for your project. The other alternative is to use a zigzag or an overcast stitch on your sewing machine and just run a line of stitching on this raw edge. Another alternative is to use either a product called Fray Block or Fray Check. This is actually kind of a glue-like substance, and you need to read the instructions. For example, with Fray Block, you need to shake it, and then it has this cute little narrow nozzle in which you would just add a line of the product on the edge. Let it dry, don't set it down on anything, and it will seal the threads from unraveling. You do want to store this in a heavy container, like a cup here, and just set it off to the side, and be mindful of any surfaces that you work on, because it is glue-like, almost like a super glue type resin type product, and it will adhere to your table. So you want to have these in a place where you could actually elevate them a bit to let them dry. All right, if you choose to use those 2 products, and that's Fray Check or Fray Block. But once you get your edges finished, then you can go to your ironing segment. Now, each team will receive a pattern. Now, this is heat-resistant template plastic. You can be found in quilting sections of most sewing and quilting stores, but it's heat-resistant, meaning that you can iron it and you won't melt it. It's a good product. And these will already come pre-marked. This is 1 inch wide, and we're going to use that later. And it also has some registration dots and this lovely line down the center. We're going to start with this lovely line down the center, and this is going to help us know how far in to fold our hem on our handles. So we have a finished handle here. And what I want you to do is, let me show on this one, is to take the edge and fold it up to that line. Then you'll notice I have these blue fingers. These are silicone fingers that are heat resistant. And what you can do is just run your iron down. And we're going to be pressing. Now, ironing is going back and forth really hard, but pressing is just adding pressure and heat and moving it. We don't want to burn the fabric or leave it there too long. If you're having trouble getting a nice sharp crease, go ahead and get yourself a water bottle and just give it a brief spritz. Oh, I've got mine tightened down here for travel. And then go ahead and add that steam and give it a press, and that'll help it hold. And you're going to do this on both sides. So I don't know if you can see it, but I've got both sides folded in. Then the final one is taking those folded edges and matching them and coming along and giving this a final press. Now, you don't want to tug and pull and distort this, because that's going to create a bias, which will cause a stretch later, something that will be hard to fight with. Now, some of you may actually have this in your sewing room, and just to help you out, this is a hem pressing tool. And what's nice about this tool is that you don't have to worry about burning your fingers, and it's pre-marked. You'll notice here we have 1/2 inch, and here's the 1 inch mark. These are marks that we're going to use when we make our hems. So you just fold it up to the 1/2 inch, and then all you can do is take a pressing, the iron, and just press it straight across, and you don't have to worry. But metal surfaces do become hot, and so will your heat-resistant template. So be mindful of picking these up after you've had the heat on them, because they can burn you. To create the hem on your bag, first of all, you need to identify the right and the wrong side. When I look at my bags, I'm going to look for imperfections that might have been done in the weaving process, or perhaps maybe mismarkings that might have been done in the pattern tracing process. Those are things I'm going to put to the wrong side or the inside of my bag. So when we talk wrong side, when we fold our hem up, we're going to fold it to the wrong side or the inside of our bags. To do this, we're going to go back to that template resistant, or the heat resistant template. I need to say that correctly. The heat resistant template that was included in your project supplies. And this is a 1 inch thick template. And what we're going to do is you're just going to insert it, add the heat, give it a good press. That's the first press. Then you're going to rotate it one more time and give it a second press. This is going to create a nice finished edge for the top of our totes, along with a professional looking hem. Now, this has a dual purpose, because once you're done, you're going to lay the template on top, and you're going to notice these punched hole marks. The pattern designer did a fabulous job here for us. And we're going to just take our pencils and we're going to make marks. These are going to be where we place the ends of our handles. Now, you can also use a water-soluble or a piece of tailor's chalk to do this marking. We just used something very bold here so that you can see it visibly while we do our demonstrations. But anything that can be removed is always encouraged at this point. 1/4 of an inch patchwork foot, because I can get the best results there. Now, when we talk about our thread, we do want you to use a matching color. There is a recommendation in the instruction sheet about using a matching color thread so that it blends in. The bonus to using that is if you accidentally wobble a bit when you do this, it's not visible. I do want you to always test just on any of, there should be some small leftover pieces. Just give yourself a test. Now, on the sample here for today, we'll be sewing with black thread. Do not sew these together with black thread. But we're just sewing these together with black thread so that it's highly visible for our students today. All right, so talking a little bit more about my machine, I have it threaded with the polyester thread. I have the same color thread in my bobbin. I am going to use a stitch length of about a 2.5. This is a really nicely pressed handle, and it's holding together so well I don't need pins. If I'm going to pin, go ahead and insert one perpendicular to where we're going to be stitching. These are my 2 folded edges. This is my single fold. The 2 double folded edges are what we're going to be top stitching down. And as a hint to get you started, sometimes it is helpful to pull the bobbin thread to the top. You do this by hanging on to the upper thread, what comes through the needle in your left hand, and you turn the hand wheel towards you. And what this does is it pulls the bobbin thread, I don't know if you can see that, but it pulls it up to the top. And then you can just take this and sometimes hold it off to the back. I'm just lifting it up under my presser foot here. But by doing this and bringing it to the top part of my work table, what this does is it prevents those little thread nests underneath on the bottom side, and then you can go ahead and start sewing. If your machine is shoving the edge of this down, sometimes you can gently hold this up slightly, and that'll help lift that fabric up and have it pull through. Another thing that you can do is start perhaps, about a centimeter in, give yourself a few stitches, and then just back stitch to the edge all the way, and then come right back over. Now if you're still having trouble, your machine is giving you some heartache, lengthen your stitch slightly, but nothing over 3. A 3 is actually a home deck, but you're just going to keep going, and you're going to sew this edge all the way through. When you get to the end of your, we're going to pretend that this is actually one of my handles. When you get to the end, just put your next handle in. By doing this, you're going to assembly line sew handle after handle and just keep going into the groove of things. And this will actually save you thread because all you have are these small pieces to trim, and it'll save you time of having to fight getting that started over and over again. Now, something to be cautious of. I don't know if you noticed it, but when I was doing this, I was basically holding this, just slightly pushing it away, not pulling or tugging, just holding this up against the edge, or if we had the tongue depressor here, I would be holding it against this unit here. And this would be taped down, but just to give it, just guiding it, not doing anything forceful. If you tug and pull, you're going to start fighting that bias, and what can happen is you can end up with a strap that does the twist, and we don't want straps that twist on our handles. So just by letting the actual fabric guide itself, you're going to get a nice finished product and a nice handle. To construct the hem at the top of our tote, I'm going to go ahead and go back to an original presser foot, and I'm going to use this inside portion of my left foot with my needle hitting the center justification here. What that's going to do is give me a very small hem that will look really nice on our product. Now, if your pressing is lovely, you may not even have to pin this, but if you are going to pin, go ahead and pin perpendicular. We never want to sew over a pin. It can take your machine out of timing. And just like we did on the handles, I want you to focus at that inside portion of the presser foot and not watch the needle. If you watch the needle, you'll make yourself dizzy. Okay, once again, I'm just going to hold my upper thread in my hand and pull that bobbin thread to the top just to get that nice clean finish on the outside, because remember, this hem portion is on the inside or the wrong side of our totes. And I want this to look extra nice for the recipients. Okay, and once again, just start watching that inner side, or that inner foot of my presser foot. When I come to a pin, I'm just going to pull it out and keep going. To attach your handles, remember those registration marks that we put using our template? We want to center this handle, and if you don't know where the center is, just gently fold it, mark it right on. And the other thing you're going to do is that finished edge. It may be zigzagged, you may have the fray block or fray check, or it may actually be a selvage. Just lower that just a slight bit, just so we're eliminating excess bulk here. Then you're going to go ahead and either pin this in place. If you have really good sharp pins, it works really well. Or what I like to use is a little bit of painter's tape right there. Okay. Once again, I'm going to use the same setup. Now, remember, I tested my stitch. I'm also going to look at the back side. Did I have a lot of knots like this? Does it look messy? These are things I'm going to be looking for. If I get a really super nice stitch, then I'm going to feel confident just stitching from this side. And if I need to, I can give myself a slight mark just to make sure that I'm going to sew and catch both the hem and the handle. What I'm going to do ideally is just sew a small box all the way around the handle. This secures it, and once again I'm going to use the inside, but I'm going to use the inside of the right side of the presser foot. To get this started, once again I'm going to go ahead and insert my needle and pull my bobbin thread to the top of the project. And if you have trouble pulling that bobbin thread up, go ahead and take your small scissors or a blunt device and just run it underneath, and that'll help pull that bobbin thread to the top and let you grab a hold of it. You just don't want to cut it. All right. Now I'm looking in here to make sure I get it lined up right, and I'm going to use the inside of my presser foot right over here as my guide. All right, and as I get close here with my tape, I am going to pull it back. But don't worry, if you accidentally sew through your tape, you can pull it out later. I'm going to go clear to the edge of my fold of my top hem and insert my needle. Then I'm going to lift my presser foot, pivot my bag, and continue sewing. I'm going to sew all the way around the handle, creating a cute little box that'll offer security. If you're sewing in groups, this would also be a good project for your one of your better stitchers because it requires a little bit of skill. When I get right to where I started again, I'm going to just re-sew a small segment. And backstitch. Then I will pull it out and trim my threads. So when you're finished sewing your box, when you take a look at the back side, it should look nice and clean, just like this. Now you're going to repeat this for the other handles. Go ahead. All right, so just as a reminder, we are sewing our handles on the wrong side, or the inside, the hem side of the bag. And when you attach your handle, when you pin it, you want to make sure that there's no twisting to this handle, that it's going to lay nice and flat. And just as a checkpoint, if you make sure that your top stitch edge of your handle is always on the inside, that'll help maintain that uniformity and the quality that we're looking for in these bags. So after we get all of our handles attached, our next focus is going to be sewing the side seams. And on your sewing machine, we're going to make a French seam, which is basically an enclosed seam so that none of our raw edges unravel. So to do this, you're going to take your two hems, that's the top, the wrong sides, and put them together. This is definitely different from garment construction basics when you put the right sides together. We're going to put our wrong sides together, and sometimes it's just helpful to get a little pin here so when you're manipulating your fabric underneath your presser foot, it's going to hold that together. All right, and then you can pin all the way down, and we're going to put your finger in the hole here at the fold, and that helps to align things. But once again, we're going to use a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, which is the edge of our presser foot. And I'm going to pull my thread to the top of the project, or the bobbin thread to the top of the project once again. And then give it a start. And it's kind of nice to go slow and steady because you've got almost 6 layers of fabric at this top seam allowance. Okay, so now we've sewn both of our seam allowances at a 1/4 of an inch. What we're going to do next is turn our bag inside out. All right, and you may need to gently press out the points, the corners, with your finger, or sometimes I use a chopstick. get those points out. And it is thick fabric. It may take a little bit of time. Okay, now once I get this turned out, I'm going to take this to my iron, and I'm going to make sure that I get this seam allowance all the way open. Okay, I'm going to take my time and give this a really nice press all the way down. And then I'm going to go on the other side. And sometimes if you just run, this is just a standard chopstick, run this in on that seam allowance like this. That'll help it force it out. And you can also use the chopstick to help you push it on the inside. Those of you that have a pressing ham, you can also insert this and give it a nice flat press and then press it flat this way. While you're at the ironing station though, go ahead and press a nice crease along the bottom of your tote. That's going to help us in another step later on. But give it a good press. Then what we're going to do with the wrong sides out is we're going to take and make a mark on our sewing machine with either the note card, or even you can just use a small pad of Post-it notes here. And we're going to measure over a ½ inch from our needle, and that's going to be our next seam allowance. And this is on the wrong side. Remember, the actual hem is on the wrong side, and we will be sewing a ½ inch seam allowance all the way down the side of this tote. And that's going to create our enclosed hem and our French stitching. And when you get to the top of the tote, I want you to give it a really good back stitch here, forward and backwards, because this is going to be one of the stress points to the tote. And that's very important that you do that forward and backward stitching here. And then you're going to repeat the same stitching on the other side of the tote. You're finished doing the last ½ inch seam allowance. You're going to have it sewn down both sides, and you notice you're going to have the reinforced top. This again is the wrong side of our totes. We've got our hem here. This is what the outside of the tote's going to look like. It's going to be absolutely fabulous, and all of our seam allowances are encased. Now, you're going to look in your box of supplies for this triangle template that we're going to use to help box our corners of our totes. Right, to create your boxing corners, once again, we want the wrong side of the tote out towards us, and we're going to insert our hand and just kind of flatten the corner here. And what we want to do is we want to create a flattened area where this seam allowance, where we stitched that last seam of our French seam, meets right over the top of our pressed seam on the bottom of the tote. And the way you can test this is just to poke a pin in on that stitching line and then poke it through, coming out the other side that has the press. And then what you can do is just manipulate the fabric flat so that the pin is actually perpendicular. Let's see if I can show you. Perpendicular to the actual piece, the corner of the tote, the box of it. Then what you're going to do is take your template, and I've drawn a line on this. You can go ahead and do this. It's just to help me center down the center of the stitching line, and I'm going to match my folded edges here, and then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to lay this down here, and I'm just going to draw a stitch line for me to follow, and I like to start in the center, and go out both ways. Then before I lift this up, what I like to do is just pin my layers together. I'm going to insert this into my sewing machine and just backstitch, sew down this line, and backstitch off to the edge. I'm going to take a few stitches to anchor it. I'm going to go back, and this is a must. You must do backstitching at this point. That's going to help reinforce that seam and keep our box. Sometimes when you get over those multiple layers, you may have to lift your presser foot up just slightly. And when you get to the edge of your drawn line, we're going to backstitch again. Once again, that's just going to help maintain the integrity of our tote bottoms and that box shape. Then when you're done, once again, we're going to trim our threads. And then you can turn your tote bag inside out, and you have a lovely boxed edge. When you finish your tote, be sure to lay them flat as possible and then stack them up. We hope to either silk screen these or embroider on them, so we want them as usable as possible right away.